Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of our discussion series, Game Gabs, where we discuss the things that we would normally just talk about in our group chat and instead bring them to you guys. Today, given Halloween and everything, although we're a bit late on that one.
Just a little bit late, especially.
A little bit late.
Oh wait, no, we're filming this late, so it'll be uploaded. No, it's not that far, I guess.
It'll be uploaded soon.
A little bit late.
Yeah, still a bit late. But given Halloween, which we aren't wearing our costumes for and definitely should have been, wish we'd thought of that and kept them.
I would die in my costume. It's
Well, you
so
could have
hot.
taken the helmet off afterwards.
31 degrees, Lucky.
True. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about horror in games. Horror games, horror themes in games, all things spooky, scary, horror, skeletons.
I don't know if I can actually sing that.
I don't know
with
if,
that,
yeah, me neither. That one.
I'm sure that's copyrighted by now.
But yeah, so as usual, we want to hear your thoughts, so let us know in the comments, and let's get started. We're gonna roll to see who's.
What's the spoopiest game that made you spoopy your pants?
Mm.
Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to roll to start off the conversation as we always do, though this time we don't so much have topics picked up. So it's just going to be who has to talk first.
Yeah, we're just throwing each other in the deep end who is forced to start the chat.
Yeah. All right. Let's go.
I rolled well. I got a 14.
I got a 20.
Fuck you.
I also got a 14.
Well, there's no real order to this one, so I think that means that Cal can go first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cal, tell us about your horror experience.
Yeah, well, I'm probably the worst person to go first with this because I don't play a lot of horror games. I haven't played that many, to be honest. I guess really the only one that I can say I've played through would be The Last of Us. If you call that a horror game?
Yeah, that's a horror.
It is, yeah.
It's at very least, as I said, we're not just going to talk about horror games, because even for me, that's a pretty limited list already. Because I am a scaredy cat.
I think I'm the only one.
Sleep.
I'm the only one who's played a decent amount of horror games, and even then, a decent amount is like maybe 5 or 6 games.
Yeah.
Jack's played horror games because he's played every game under the sun.
This is this is what having to capture footage does, is that it makes you do these things. My camera's a little bit blurry, but I don't want to risk fixing it, so we'll just deal with it for now.
It's just because he's a specter, a ghost. Scary specter. But yeah, no, The Last of Us is absolutely, like, it's got some pretty strong horror themes. Like, the whole zombie thing is obviously a pretty trite horror thing, and it feels like that's been done to death, but it's still got.
I feel like the Last of Us, that stuff comes second to the story and the gameplay, whereas a lot of like genre-defining horror games, it's like what's going to scare you and make you like on the edge of your seat and test your reaction time, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. But that said, like, The Last of Us does slot in pretty well with like the horror-themed story things in that movies like The Road have done as well. Like The Road and The Last of Us are pretty similar.
I haven't seen that movie in so long.
I had to study that in year 11.
I haven't seen it.
Nobody else.
Viggo Mortensen. Mortensen?
Yes.
Aragorn.
Aragorn. Yeah.
And nobody else understood why I thought it was a more hopeful movie than The Life of Pi.
It's a super religious movie too.
Is it?
Yeah. From memory, it's like all about Christianity and that. Like the kid is an allegory for Jesus or something.
That sounds like maybe a stretch that could be made about many movies, but let's not go there with this. But anyway.
That's right. Keep talking. Keep talking. I'm Googling.
Okay. So yeah, like to me, The Last of Us does fit into that boat though, where it's like, yes, it's a story, but the backdrop of the world is a horror theme.
Yeah. And there were moments in that did scare the shit out of me.
Oh yeah, and there's tons of jump scares where you go, you're mashing triangle to open a door, and then a clicker goes, and you got to shoot it before it gets you, and yeah.
Or the friggin' when you get caught in that trap and you're hanging upside down, you got to shoot.
I hated that bit so much. I hated that bit so much because you sway so much. It just gave me Marauder Shields flashbacks. We've just talked about Mass Effect in every single one of these. It's gonna happen. But yeah, like that. Yeah, there's definitely horror moments there, and like the spoilers for The Last of Us if you have not yet played it. The bit with, I think it's Henry and Sam. The
Been so long for me.
the two guys you meet.
The brothers.
Yeah, the brothers.
Yeah.
That bit's so like
in the
Walking
sewer.
Dead. What's that?
When you're in the sewer, that was probably the scariest part of the game.
Yeah,
because
the sewer was real scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, the school when you go down into the bit with the bloater and all the clickers and stuff.
Okay, I remember the other bit being scary because they just friggin' come for you, and we can't detect them with your X-ray vision thing.
I mean, I only played on Survivor and Grounded, so I've literally never experienced the game with X-ray vision.
Well, that's what that sewer part that it's like that for that sort of part of the game. So
Yeah.
it takes away something that you're very comfortable with and throws you in the deep end of it because the runners can't be detected.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they can't be detected.
No, they 100% can.
It's been so long since I've played that game that I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember much, but I remember they're harder to find because I'm pretty sure once they stop and they settle in a little spot, they become silent.
Yes, I think that is the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the clickers are always making noise.
Mm.
I think that the big thing actually that is one of the things actually that I just sort of brought up by accident. One of the things about The Last of Us, and that actually is worth talking about with horror in games, is how gameplay in horror games for me is a really weird and jarring thing. Like often games with horror themes and horror world and all that sort of stuff have gameplay that is super not horror. So like when I played Dead Space, that was my big issue with it. And The Last of Us,
literally
same
about
deal.
to bring that up. I was literally about to say that I first really caught on to the differences because I've played games like Resident Evil is probably the mid ground, so maybe I won't use that as an example to start off with, but I've played games like Outlast.
Yep.
And
Amnesia is a great one.
Very brief extent Amnesia.
Yeah.
But I just recently played Dead Space. And I remember the very start of Dead Space, I didn't have a gun or anything. Obviously, you never get a gun exactly. It's like tools, but you get the idea. And one of the necromorphs, I think that's what they're called, jumped out at me. I'm like, oh God, oh shit, oh man, I need to run. And it was freaking the hell out. And then I got a gun and I wasn't scared for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I haven't played all of Dead Space. I only played it at mates' houses when I was a teenager, and I literally never found the game scary. Now, admittedly, I was at a mate's house, which always ruins the scare, but
yes,
I literally never found the game scary just because of the fact that it felt like Doom to me.
Well, I
like
think
that sort
the
of game.
thing is not so much a matter of, this experience isn't a frightening one. It's just that when you have such an element of control, you can kind of deal with the aspects that would be frightening. Whereas you play a game like Amnesia or Outlast, where you can't do anything but run, and you have no control to save yourself. There's a lot more. It's very tense. And it creates the atmosphere of if you were in this kind of situation a lot better. And that's not to say that it means that Outlast is a better horror game than Dead Space is. It's just two very extremely different aspects. And I think towards the more Outlast kind of thing is closer to where games like The Last of Us fits, but it's less of an outright action game. It's like, hey, you need to make sure that you don't use all of your shit. So sometimes you just got to deal with it and be like, all right, I'm out here. Fuck you guys. And best you can do is send them in other directions.
And that's
still less of a kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's actually what I was about to. So that's where I was going with The Last of Us. So most people that I have spoken to never played the game on Survivor or Grounded. And whilst I haven't played it on below that, to me, that's where the game actually starts to feel like a horror game. Because you don't have listen mode, you have no HUD, your resources are so limited that you can't afford to shiv a clicker if you want to be able to open the next like shiv door. You literally only have enough shivs to open every shiv door in the game. That's it. So if you want to open the shiv doors, you can't kill clickers. They're invincible to you, basically. And you have so few bullets that it's the sort of thing where it's like, shooting is an only when I absolutely have to situation.
Yeah, it basically becomes a stealth game.
it becomes a stealth survival horror game, basically. Yeah. And that to me is like the real experience of The Last of Us Part 1. The Last of Us Part 2, I'm yet to actually, I just did it on normal because I wanted to do the story, and I don't feel like I feel the same way about that. I'll have to play it on those difficulties, but it doesn't feel like it has the same horror feel, and I know neither of you two have played it, so you can't really comment on that.
I don't know.
But yeah, I think that's actually a thing. I like, to me, I would say anyone who's a fan of The Last of Us but hasn't played it on Survivor or Grounded, and who is a fan of horror, definitely go back and try it on those difficulties. Or even if you haven't played it yet, if you know you're into horror, play it on those difficulties, because it amps up the horror so much to me.
Yeah.
I'll probably do that next time because I've been meaning to play it again so I can play the second one. It's been I only played it like when it first came out on PS3. I haven't played it since. So
I'll play both when I inevitably get a PS5. Just requires money.
Yeah. And I feel like, to be perfectly honest as well with what I just said, some games, like, I understand the difficulty thing. Like, the reason a lot of people don't like higher difficulty is just because it's harder and it's like, oh, it takes more bullets or whatever. But the thing that The Last of Us did really well with their difficulty, which is this, they amped up the horror thing. It's like they gave you less resources, they gave you no HUD, they gave you no listen mode. The runners still die in one headshot. Clickers still only take like 2 or 3. You die very quickly, but it's like the enemies still die pretty much just as fast. It's just you die in like 2 hits and you have very few tools with which to deal with them. So it just makes it feel like super real. And as a result, the difficulty in it doesn't feel ridiculous. It actually feels like it's hard, but hard in the way the game should be, to me anyway. Whereas playing some games on a hard difficulty, I'm like, this is just frustrating. I'm sick of this fight.
Yeah, I was going to say the biggest thing for me with difficulty is for pacing reasons. Like a lot of the time, and it really depends on the game, but a lot of the time, if you're in it for a story experience and playing on the hardest difficulty and getting stuck in one battle for like an hour, you're just kind of like, okay, cool, time to jump back into it. What were we doing? And shit like that. That's some games. And then there are other games where playing on a harder difficulty just makes it a more grueling process and less likely to finish it, which in the case of example, not a horror game. No, the scariest game you could ever think of, Crash Bandicoot 4. I really enjoy it, but I still haven't beat it and I don't know when I will, because getting 100% in that game, I don't think is that enjoyable, because it's like, it's not even that it's so hard that it's bullshit. It's just that everything, like doing everything completely, takes a long time and is quite difficult. Not like I want to die or even pushing it stupidly from the first game. It's just there's so much like you need to be perfect for a solid 20 to 30 minutes, and it's like, why?
Yeah, so
and it just makes it so like it's a fun game casually, but to get through the whole thing in this game's hard mode, which is just completing everything, it's kind of like, man, this is just making it less enjoyable for me.
I totally see that, because, like, you know, again, this has become a discussion about difficulty, but, you know, again, the thing that I'd say with that is like, you know, so for me, like The Witcher, for example, I did play that on the hardest difficulty and the start sucked. And I would not recommend for most people doing that unless they want the achievements or they're a masochist like me. But the game eventually gets pretty easy, and that means that the hard difficulty doesn't make the completion a pain. The completion is long, but it's fun, it's easy. You just wander around doing things. You can easily put on a show while you're wrapping up some of the stuff and then turn that off when you get to story content. So even though that was a long completion, I think it took me like 200 hours, it didn't bother me, because I didn't really have to work at it. Whereas a game that's a long completion and you have to work at it, like you have to just be really on point the whole time, is just really draining.
Yeah. I do think atmosphere sometimes kind of warrants those things as well. And especially if a game is more on merit for its gameplay than it is for its story. In those kinds of games, sometimes playing on hard mode just adds to the experience. Like, I can't remember what it was, but there was a game that I played recently where playing it on easy or medium just wasn't fun because there was no real challenge to it. And it was like,
Fallen Order.
Probably, but I don't remember if I played that on easy, because I know I played the whole thing on the hardest difficulty.
You played it on the hardest, but I can, that was absolutely my feeling with that, was if this game was any easier, it would not be fun.
Yeah, also I didn't find it particularly hard.
Well, that's
because that's also because I broke it.
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, it was like the easiest Souls-like game I've ever played. But it was still.
Hey, if you want to play Dark Souls but you suck, just play Fallen Order. Anyways, but yeah, like I said, I think difficulty does add to atmosphere a bit and like tense things. But I kind of touched on it by accident when I was talking. Hello, hello, baby.
Bedtime.
This is a very good distraction.
Oh, good.
Just pushing the door open. What the hell was I saying? Oh yeah, it was I was talking about like the mid ground, but when we were talking about action heavy and like very limited resource and a bit like not being able to fight back games. I was thinking about this the other day because I was thinking, oh, what could I bring having played a few more horror games? I wanted to talk about how fascinating Resident Evil 2 is to me.
Okay.
And I'm talking the original game. I got Cal to play a bit of it, and from memory, you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was actually pretty scary too, considering how old it is.
Yeah. Well, I've got so many things to talk about for this topic, so just bear with me.
I did play Resi 1 on the PS1 quite a bit as like
similar vibe, yeah.
A 6-7 year old, and we could only do like the first level because we sucked at games. But it scared the crap out of me. And for whatever reason, me and my friend Kyle, we always called the zombies slushies because we didn't know what the word zombie was, and we just called them that. The only thing I remember about that game.
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is how much I hate, but how perfect the controls in that game are. Tank controls suck. I really don't like tank controls in horror games. Well, not in horror games, sorry. I don't like tank controls in most games. But in the context of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, holy shit, it works. Because it really adds, it adds in that, oh shit, what am I going to do atmosphere when you are when you have a loaded weapon and shit like that. Silent Hill kind of is a little bit less like that. It's less of an action game, more of a horror game. But I think it adds a level of tenseness to Resident Evil that I just find fascinating. That this control scheme that really frustrates me actually works quite well for it. Also, I think the camera system in that game is also a big part of it. Because if it was flipping cameras all the time, then you'd be like, all right, I want to go forward. Oh shit, now I'm running into a wall, or I'm running right, but I'm holding the wrong direction and shit like that. So I think it kind of warrants to that. But I think it creates a very tense atmosphere for those games that makes them really effective, which is just bizarre to me because.
But is that actually is that a fault of the controls? As in, like, because the controls are bad, you feel like you suck, and therefore it feels scarier.
The time thing.
I don't feel like I suck when I play it. It just makes it more panic-inducing because like, oh shit, I have to turn around and then I got to run.
You got to pause to like turn and aim, and like everything requires time, and these things are slowly walking up to you.
Yeah, so it's less like I'm going to shoot this thing until the last minute and then run away. It's like I need to shoot this thing and then decide when I need to piss off, or else it's going to just get to me. Okay. And it just makes everything a little bit more tense and intimidating, because you might know how many shots it takes to kill an enemy, or maybe you don't, because you can actually aim in the game. Despite how it looks, you can actually aim.
Yeah, it works.
And again, it's a lot more vague, which I do like. I do like the vagueness of aiming, because maybe not so much in the context of some of the characters, because, they're like military trained people or police officers. But in real life, you don't know that pointing exactly in one direction is going to go anywhere near where you're going. Yes, there is leeway in terms of your reticle is here, but it could shoot here, or it could shoot here. But a real life person might be a little bit more vague on that. So I kind of like that. I don't have any strong opinions of it, but I think the way that their gameplay works in theory, because I never played it because I didn't like the sound of it, just seems so strange. But playing it, I don't know, it just really helps with the tense atmosphere of the game and making it a bit more intimidating. And
that's interesting.
I don't really see it in many games these days, I think. And
that's because everyone would riot if they got a game with tank controls, because they're awful.
But like, even still, like, I think Resident Evil 4, it lost the camera angle thing, but I think it's still tank controls from memory. I could be wrong though. I don't know. I do not recall if that's correct.
The camera angle thing also the same thing. It's like Final Fantasy X, or like any old Final Fantasy game where it's fixed, changes. Yeah. Is that how it works? I'm pretty sure, yeah, Jack.
Yeah, so it literally, it's a camera in a room and you move around, and once you get to a new point, the camera just shifts.
Yeah, so that when you don't know what's sort of around the corner as well, it kind of adds to
Yeah.
Yeah, you
I
you
think-
get to the point the camera changes and then there's enemies and you shoot yourself a little bit.
It's a lot of strange ideas that really work in the game's favor, which is interesting to me.
I don't know if it's ideas. I think it's just the limitations of the time.
Oh,
And
no,
it just-
like I think in some degree, yes, but I feel like from memory, there are games that just didn't do that. And like I think this was at a time where like GoldenEye existed, and that was closer to what modern shooters are today.
But that's because the 64 had a joystick and the PS1 didn't initially. That's why it was able to do more of that kind of control.
That is true, but I still don't know that is why necessarily. Because from memory, I feel like it had a joystick by then, but I don't know because I was very young, so I might be wrong.
I wouldn't imagine so. The PS1 didn't for ages.
It was like the last couple of years, but even if it did, they would have been using probably the way that they designed Resident Evil 1, which definitely wouldn't have had a joystick at that time.
Joystick control.
But-
I'll Google this. Also, I was wrong about the road, or maybe I wasn't, and maybe it's just not on Wikipedia. But I could just be thinking of a different movie. I've seen an apocalypse movie, which was like very subtly, not subtly. It was like very religiously themed.
Yeah, I wouldn't have
thought it was
thought of the road as being religiously themed. It seemed to me to be more about hope, which I think was, this is the wrong discussion, but we had this whole thing where it was like, I thought The Life of Pi was relentlessly awful and depressing. And everyone was like, no, it was bright. And I'm like, yeah, it had bright colors, but it was a dark movie.
I haven't seen it.
It was a pretty dark movie, but I still really like that movie.
Oh, no, I loved it. I'm just saying, like,
the way you said horrible, I was like, oh.
No. I loved the movie. I mean, like, to me, the themes were so dark, whereas The Road, it was almost like because they'd made the world so dark, the moments of brightness felt more hopeful. Whereas there in The Life of Pi, it was almost like the brightness is a facade to cover up the darkness, and that meant that to me was a darker, more depressing movie. Whereas The Road was more hopeful, and I could not convince anyone.
I need to watch both again to really comment. I don't think I necessarily agree about Life of Pi, but I don't remember it enough to actually have that conversation today. So
yeah, it was mostly about the twist of the movie. That for me was the obvious thing.
Yeah, right.
But yeah.
So, yeah, I guess to finish up my horror experience, so The Last of Us, yes. I don't know if you would count BioShock. Played all of those, loved them. I did find the first one particularly scary.
I would
some
absolutely
parts.
count. I would absolutely count BioShock.
And
yeah,
the second one, I didn't feel scared playing it because you are the big daddy and you just have to survive and kill things. And I actually found it a pretty boring game, to be honest. But the third one,
2 seconds.
the third one is like not scary, but you just always feel uncomfortable playing it, or at least I did. I'm like, this
100%.
This game is really making me feel uncomfortable.
I think the strength of the third game, from what I've seen, is that whilst it didn't necessarily go as heavy with the horror styling, it kept the horror theming. And
Yes,
that was the big thing that made it, like, it still felt like BioShock despite being bright and colorful and all this stuff.
Also, the one of the big things about BioShock, and one of the things that makes, you know, BioShock 1 really interesting and BioShock Infinite, is that the general themes of the games are about ethics and morals, basically. And the horror comes from perversions and extremes of those ethics and morals, and what happens without them and what happens with them and all that sort of thing. And it's almost like Columbia and Rapture are very similar and almost polar opposite. And that means that because they've got this kind of core concept that's similar, and as you say, they keep the horror themings, and there's still some horror bits, including like the soundtrack of Infinite is quite horror, that really tense, off kilter stuff.
Our first episode.
Yep. Which means that, you know, there were elements of horror in them, which kept it to me feeling very, like they were part of the same series, even though I haven't played enough of BioShock 1 because I suck.
Oh man, BioShock 1's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's next.
So, I mean, I guess there are horror themes. I've been pretty on edge in some Fallout games. Like some of the vaults are weird as,
The
and like
vaults can be pretty fucked.
I reckon that the vaults are pretty scary.
Yeah,
Obviously, you got
Fallout's got some horror themes.
and aside from that, like we're really digging back to like old Nintendo games that shouldn't be scary. So like, as a 7-year-old going through the Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time, like man, I had nightmares doing that stuff. The Re-Deads scared
Don't
the
think we
crap
can
out
count
of me.
that.
the thing that I was going to mention
As a game, I mean, not as a horror game.
when I was talking about Resident Evil, outside of all the stuff that I just said, like how it's kind of this weird midpoint between being enough action focus that you feel like you can control what's happening, but also having the limitations that make it a little bit scary. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with specifically because of PS1 was how PS1 graphic limitations, I think actually really worked for a lot of horror games. And this is more from just a core belief that I have about design and like what creativity can actually do, is that the more information you're given, usually things become way less frightening.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
That is so a thing. Yeah.
And like so many people will make fun of PS1 games and be like, what the hell am I looking at? But I actually think that works a lot in those games' favors. In the thing when it comes to like the monsters in the old Resi games and a lot of the stuff in Silent Hill, because it's literally like, what are these polygons on my screen? Is you have to use your imagination to fill in the blanks. And the unknown and what you can imagine is almost always scarier than what someone can give you. Whilst there are often a lot of really fantastically designed horror creatures that will scare the shit out of everyone for the rest of time, usually the strongest thing that you can create fear with is your own mind, because you know what you're scared of. And that's what I love about those old. That's the one thing I'll always defend about older games, is that their limitation allowed that.
I think that actually, I think that the tank controls the camera. That's all. Like, whilst you say choices, maybe they were choices, they were still elements of limitation. Like, if those games were being made for the first time today, they would not be. They'd probably be first person.
Yeah, I will not put my hand down and say, no, they did this because it's smart, but I'm saying that it works.
No, I get you. And I do think, like, one of the interesting things about, talking about limitations and stuff, and the comment I made earlier about gameplay, and actually combined again with what you can imagine and stuff. One of the things about like games, like I'll just talk about Amnesia, because there's a few others, but Amnesia is the big one. Until Dawn, I could actually talk about with this as well. But
yeah,
Amnesia, there's a big moment in Amnesia that sticks in my mind, which is this moment where there's like, you come to the edge and there's this room full of water with a couple of platforms in it. On the other side of the room, there's this door with a wheel next to it in the water. And there's body parts everywhere. And you're like, okay, what's going on? So you toss a limb into the water, or you jump in, whatever happens. And suddenly footsteps start going in the water. No creature, just splashes that are probably footsteps. And when they reach whatever's in the water, whether it's you or the limb, they devour it. They chew it up.
Yeah.
And that's like, you don't know what this creature is.
It's like early into the game too, isn't it?
Yeah, very early in the game. You don't know what this creature is. You have no way of knowing what this creature is. You just know that it eats flesh.
Yeah.
And that is scary, and that it slowly walks towards things. So you're like, okay, so here's the thing. You got the limbs. You can't work out that you toss the limbs away and it'll chase them, and then you're able to do this. But then the scariest moment for me in that whole freaking game was the bit where you're standing on the platform, you toss the limb, and then you have to jump into the water and turn the wheel. And the way you do that in Amnesia is grabbing your mouse and going around and around in circles like this. So you're having to frantically move your arm, desperately trying to make this thing open as you're hearing footsteps in the water behind you going, getting closer. You're just packing Dax because you can't see it. It's behind you, and you couldn't see it even when you were looking at it.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like the thing that sort of like Amnesia and the horror games that have kind of taken that approach since did really well, was use the unknown against you. The fact that like hiding in a closet is the way to avoid monsters in that, but it also drives you insane. So you can't do it for too long
That's what I was going to talk about too. Was I think that insanity systems, whilst I'm sure there are cases where it's probably being used shit. I think those are awesome because they're a consequence for watching all of the shit that's going on. So seeing all these horrible things, it's not like, okay, I need to know where it is and watch it so I can avoid it. You have to be constantly unsure of what's happening, or there is consequences for that level of safety, so to speak. And I love that because it's like you have to put yourself into uncomfortable positions or things are just going to get worse. And it's like, man, that's awesome.
You never feel safe in that game. Literally never. And I think that's one of the things I find with the more action-focused horror games is that to me, once you're good at them, it just becomes a matter of what they tend to focus on is the jump scares and things like that, right? Because then they get the scare by scaring the player, not scaring the character. That sort of thing. And I think what games like Amnesia do so well, and Until Dawn as well, actually, is I just realized my name is not Lockie. She won't care. The thing about those games that put you into their shoes so much more is that you can relate to the situation they're in better because you are just like them. Oh my God, Jack, what are you doing?
Trying to fix the focus. It's being a real bully today. I think that's better. You just have to ignore me. I'm sorry. One day I'll buy a light and things will just be better. I'm sorry.
But yeah, so like Until Dawn really did that for me. But at the same time, same deal there. Until Dawn, the start was so much scarier than the end because you don't know what's going on. And then when you do, it's intense, but it's not as scary.
Yeah.
Though Until Dawn actually does
action horror than horror.
Yeah. Although Until Dawn does still balance that very well. Like it's only the very end of the game where that becomes the case, and the way you deal with them is still scary as hell. Like you still never feel like I'm in control of this. Yeah. It's just like now I know kind of what to do. But yeah. I think it's a big thing.
I think there are a lot of cool ways that people have started to kind of put horror together as well.
Yeah.
And I think just that constant of being unsure is just the biggest thing. Like, that's why I love games where things change based on how you play when it's incorporated into a horror game. Because when a game's the same the whole way through, I don't know, replayability kind of gets affected there because you're like, okay, I know how to avoid this guy. That's why with games, I could be wrong because I've only played Outlast once, but as far as I know, you play it once, play it again, same thing. We're a game where it's like, okay, I can do this, and this to avoid my problems. I like games that kind of allow room for things to go differently based on how you're going to play it so that you make different choices and you never have that sense of, I'm good. Don't worry about it. Don't even stress. You're fine. Yeah. But that's purely those games where the option of fighting back and stuff like that isn't really present. Like in a game like Dead Space, I would never say, oh, it needs this, because you can always fight your way out of situations. I think for games like that, the switchover would be ammo management. So maybe you have to run past enemies instead of fight them sometimes. That would probably help. But that could very well be a thing in the highest difficulty. I played it on medium because I was streaming and I didn't want to spend 3 hours on the first chapter.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I had, because I think the only times I died were from dumb decisions rather than, oh no, this is really hard. But I also only got like 3 chapters in, so I can't really speak for that. But yeah, I said, I think the factor of the unknown is just a big help in games like that.
Yeah. There's actually a game as well which you both need to play because I've given it to both of you. Called Dragon Age Origins.
I started it, Lockie.
But you didn't finish it, Jack.
That's because it's just
finish it.
Maybe I'll do it after Horizon. Maybe.
I think it's just the gameplay. I'm struggling so much.
Well, get good.
It's not hard. It's just
Nat played
It actually is a little bit hard
a little
anyway.
while ago.
Is it?
Like she played it for a couple of weeks, didn't finish it, but it looked really cool. I thought it looked good.
Yeah.
She enjoyed
I
it.
liked elements of it. I found it more interesting than I found it fun, was my issue. Fun is a big thing for me. I didn't really enjoy the way that it played. I liked learning about places and characters, though I found that it. I have an analogy, but I refuse to talk about it this episode. It's not. We're not saying it.
I've
at
already
all.
mentioned Mass Effect once.
No, you didn't. When did you do that?
Before.
When I said
Did
the
you?
camera shake in The Last of Us
Yeah,
brought back
yeah.
memories of Marauder Shields.
Mm.
Oh, well, I didn't hear that because I was probably looking at my phone. Well, screw you. You've ruined it. This is the 4th episode where I'm talking about fucking Mass Effect. I'm never playing this game now, just so that we can eventually stop talking about it. Or never bring it up again.
But I'll just keep playing it. It'll keep
No.
being brought up.
Nope, never happened. But fine. Like Mass Effect, that game I think does a really good job of slowly incorporating you into this world and making everything just feel alive and natural and make sense. Dragon Age didn't have that. I was like, everything's established and it's like I'm expected to know these things, and it's like I'm just forgetting information left and right. Those two things kind of stopped me from getting further into that. I'll give
That's
it another try because I know it's a game where if I get further into it, I'll enjoy it more.
I'd also suggest don't play a warrior because I think based off what you want, you should play a mage. That's
I don't
my
even
suggestion.
remember. I probably played as a warrior.
You did.
knowingly.
You played as a sword and shield warrior, and
Sure.
I would suggest playing as a mage for you, just based off what you like.
Sure.
But yeah. But what I was going to mention in that is there's actually a mission in that, which once again, it's another thing of the whole unknown thing, which is my favorite mission in the game, and because one of the things that to me is interesting about horror is that direct horror games are more rare than horror influences in games. Like when you're talking about The Last of Us before, you can argue that's a horror survival game, but really it's story game. So it's kind of like, yeah, it is. That's probably the genre it falls into. But that's not the appeal of it. The scare isn't the appeal. It's not the central focus.
Yeah, exactly.
And Resi, it is, but it stopped being. And there's enough kind of story in Resi that it doesn't really feel like there's enough action, I think, that to me it doesn't feel like the scare is the focus. It feels more like it's a horror story.
I think it started horror, became action, and then is starting to become horror again. Specifically with Resi 7, they really went back to the horror roots and it just made that game so much fun. Really liked it.
Yeah.
Wish I'd finished it though. I've got it now. I played it with a mate and didn't finish it, and now I own it because Game Pass.
I only played bits with a mate as well. Game Pass. We're just shilling it because Jack loves it so much.
Yeah.
Sponsor us, Microsoft.
It's just great. I'm sorry. Like I'm like
Yeah.
again. I've never been. I've never cared about if you're Team Xbox, Team PlayStation. The only real reason I play Xbox is because I like achievements, and I've got a decent amount of achievements. But I really just like Game Pass.
There's
I
no
played
arguing.
PlayStation more back in my younger days. I got too close to the camera. Fucking hell. And I think
Jump
PlayStation
scare.
just has the better games. But fuck, I like having a lot of games for $15.
Look, there is no arguing. Game Pass is just the best deal in gaming at the moment. Oh my god! All right, I'm gonna wait because this is annoying as hell.
It's so fucking frustrating. Why wasn't it like this in the first episode?
Maybe we just didn't realize. But yeah, look, Game Pass, is just undeniably the best deal in gaming at the moment. I think my ring light's actually like totally in frame, but whatever.
It's fine. Who cares?
I can't. There's a bed in the way. I can't fix it. So yeah, like the. So I'm. But anyway, what I was going to say is Dragon Age is interesting to me, and because in calling it dark fantasy, it's dark fantasy for the uninitiated into fantasy is fantasy as the primary, but with horror themes. So meaning, things like where the monsters in it are disturbing or terrifying or that sort of thing. The Dark Tower is arguably a dark fantasy story. Stephen King obviously is a horror writer, but a lot of his stuff strays into fantasy territory, and that would probably get classified as dark fantasy.
I probably would. I don't know if I ever really thought of it specifically as horror. I think dark fantasy is always what I had in mind.
Yeah, it's like he very much rides the line because of the supernatural elements in his books. But
I mean that's those specifically, like stories like It and some of the other stuff that he's done is very much horror. But he's done stuff like The Body and Shawshank and stuff like that, and Green
even
Mile.
The Shining.
Yeah, well, Shining's probably more thriller, but yeah.
But it's like it's the supernatural elements. It's the same as like, you know, I mean, actually, you know, arguably, if you're going to talk about dark fantasy, even things like Buffy and Supernatural kind of fall into that that mode where it's like the things they're fighting are terrible creatures, not dragons. Yeah. You know, it's like
they're like folklore creatures too, in a way.
Yeah, they are, but that can often be, so it's like that can often be a fantasy thing. But dark fantasy typically will utilize, like if it's using folklore creatures, it will be demons and flesh-eating monsters and vampires and things like that. It's so like we're playing Curse of Strahd at the moment with our D&D game. That is absolutely dark fantasy. That is epitome of like, that is like almost stereotypical gothic dark fantasy kind of theming. Anyway,
I like it.
It's great. It's awesome.
Screw you, blights. We win.
Yeah, many blights.
Not yet.
Get blown up by Shatter.
Overkill.
Yeah. But yeah, so the thing about Dragon Age Origins to me that will always set it above Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition, aside from just about everything, but like this is one of the big ones, is the tone of it, which is the dark fantasy tone. There's a lot of really fucked up stuff in Dragon Age Origins, like some really messed up stuff. In particular, one quest, the Deep Roads quest line, which you kind of have to be paying attention. Like, it's spooky and scary no matter what, but there's a subtext there.
Sorry.
There's a subtext there that is awful. Like, can't really be addressed in a game and retain an MA rating kind of levels of awful. So it's like there's implied things that happened that you don't see, that you just see the after effects of on a character who didn't experience it, just witnessed it or didn't directly experience it. And it's so disturbing when you actually kind of go, oh. And the whole kind of atmosphere of that bit, because when I first played it, I was too young and I didn't get the subtext. Like, I was 14 and I didn't get the subtext. But like, playing it on the second playthrough, I was just like, this is the worst. This is so disturbing. And it's like, it's not scary, but it's disturbing. And I actually find horror as an extra, as a theme for a game, can often be really good for creating that feeling of unsettling and disturb.
I think that's just the power of implication, really.
Yeah.
You don't need all the information. You need to, if you can put the puzzle pieces together in your head and understand how messed up a picture you're putting together, that's sometimes all you need, which is why I like when certain details aren't given. That's why I think the Lovecraftian stuff works so well. Like specifically with Call of Cthulhu, there's a whole conversation in those games between the standard, standard's probably wrong, but maybe more commercial horror fans that want to see the big monster and the gory thing, and the people who understand Lovecraftian horror will have the conversation of, why is there not more Cthulhu in my Call of Cthulhu game? Cthulhu is meant to be this indescribable creature where if you look at it, you will go insane.
So if they showed it in the game, it wouldn't work.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think not showing those things and the idea of that is more frightening.
Yeah.
Because how do you can't live up to the that kind of a description where it's indescribable.
Yeah,
there's no way you can make that scary enough.
Yes, that's actually a really big thing. Is often it's impossible to live up to the imagination slash the description because of the nature of what, particularly if you're talking about cosmic horror, so Lovecraftian stuff, the whole point there is that it's beyond understanding. So as soon as you explain it, it's ruined it.
I'm keen to play Call of Cthulhu. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's a easy completion as long as you don't get screwed over by luck.
Which, knowing you probably will, because you always seem to.
It's amazing. Like I can beat games faster than most people who aren't speedrunners, but I have the worst fucking luck. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'll need to do like 12 playthroughs to get all the achievements in that game.
Yeah. A story about Jack's luck here, again going back to our Curse of Strahd D&D game. He spent an entire session rolling poorly. And then I'm not going to spoil the campaign because many people haven't played it, but entire session rolling poorly. And then we got up to a point where his character decided that the correct solution forwards was to pretend to kill himself. And the whole party went, no, and ran in to try to stop him from killing himself. So suddenly we had initiative being rolled of player versus player. It was very exciting. And Jack just consistently rolled super high on things his character isn't good at too.
Yeah.
So it was,
like,
it's
like we have a character with 20 strength, and from memory, I think I beat her in a strength check.
Yeah, you did. You beat her in a grapple check.
She had 20, I had 9, and I won.
Yeah. It was like, and it happened so many times, and it was like, so just Jack's luck is only good when he's trying to kill himself.
Yeah, man, it's bullshit.
Yeah. But yeah. So, I mean, you've probably played lots of games like that, Cal, though, haven't you? Like, where there's these horror themes and things, even if they're not directly horror games.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Fallout, I suppose, when you go into a vault,
would absolutely
and you're trying to find out what happened to all the people here, and usually it's something really twisted. And it doesn't give you lots of visual information. You got to look through computers and you put the pieces of the puzzle together. And that was actually my favorite thing to do in Fallout, that sort of exploration, finding things and solving problems. Other games, I don't know. I mean, back in the old collectathon days, every one of those games had like a spooky level. Like Banjo did it, Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64. But none of them were actually scary. It was just, like a haunted house with
but
like...
they're horror in the Halloween sense, like the campy witches
stuff.
and vampires kind of horror. Yeah.
Although I will say Conker's Bad Fur Day as a kid, the vampire / zombie level was actually pretty terrifying. And that was mostly because of the sound effects. They were awful. But
well, dude, we should talk about sound design in video games.
Good point. That's a good point.
Probably not today because we have like 10 minutes left, but one day we should.
But we could actually talk a little bit about sound design in horror though. Now it's probably not a bad thing to mention. Sound and music, actually.
Well, I actually wanted to jump in when Cal was talking about Fallout. Is something that I've realized recently with the 3D games, because I've never played. The only reason I did, context. I'm currently playing through New Vegas for the first time. It's the only Fallout game that I've never played, which is really funny because it's a lot of people's favorite game. And favorite Fallout game. It's potentially mine. I don't know. I haven't beaten it yet. But it's also the first time where I've not listened to the radio all the way through a 3D Fallout game.
Yeah, I never did either. You're just in silence. I preferred it, honestly.
In silence?
Yeah, I never listened to the radio in Fallout.
Oh, well, I'm saying I always did.
Yeah.
I always had it on just because I liked the jazz tunes, and I think it really added some character to the games. And this is the first time I've gone through and played Fallout without it specifically because for two reasons. One, it was mostly country music, which I'm sorry, I enjoyed it, but nowhere near as much as the jazz. So I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I stopped listening to it.
We're Aussies. Can't blame us.
Yeah. But also because I didn't realize that most of the music in New Vegas is remastered tracks from 1 and 2. And I was like, oh shit. So I turned it off and I started hearing it, and oh my God, it's so good. And based on those original games and playing New Vegas without the soundtrack, it actually adds a lot to the atmosphere of the game. It makes it more tense. Because I think when you're fighting in a cave with a bunch of giant death claws or feral ghouls sprinting at you, and you're hearing anything goes in the background, it's kind of like, yeah, you're not going to be very scared. Turn that off, and all you hear is in the background and like wailing sirens. It's just like, man, I suddenly feel like I'm gonna die. And it's just incredible the difference that made. Like whether you're listening to the soundtrack or the score, it just really changes how the game feels.
That's why I never did it, because I found the music in that was immersion breaking for me.
I was exactly the same. Yeah. I never listened to the radio for the same reason. But I'm also like,
I enjoyed the songs, but I wish I had tried not listening to it for a change. Yeah.
I have spoken to so many people who don't listen to the game soundtrack while they play it, and will either put on their own music or just turn it off because then they can hear the dialogue better. And every time I meet someone who says that, yes, I'm obviously biased, but every time I meet someone who says that, I just want to punch them in the nose.
Yeah,
I'm like,
kind of. Yeah.
It's like I mean, for one, I kind of go, someone worked hard on that. Come on. But at the same time, I go, it adds so much emotion and atmosphere to a game. Like, you would never think about doing it in Ratchet and Clank or Crash Bandicoot.
Oh my god.
So why would you do it in Fallout or Resident Evil or Mass Effect, because it needs to be mentioned in as many times as possible in every episode?
I'm gonna find a way to throw my headphones at you. I don't care how far away you live.
But yeah, like, you know, music in horror games in particular, I think is really important. So like back to The Last of Us, sort of coming back full circle a little bit.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the elements, the horror elements that they do most goodly, is this super minimalist score that they have in that game, where it also is really dynamic to what you're doing. So like often when you're sneaking, as enemies get closer, the drum beats will get louder, and it's like, you're not so much hearing much music. It's mostly silent, but every now and then you'll get into like an encounter and you start to hear this like kind of like drum beat, and it's like, oh shit. And it's just kind of, it gets you going like, oh no. And then, as I said, like, you know, when you get closer to being caught, sometimes the music picks up and stuff. I mean, maybe that was just a fluke, but I swear it happened every time.
I think a lot of the atmospheric soundtracks kind of have those, so that emotion isn't too jarring. Lockie, I legitimately don't hear it. It's just when you put, well, no, I don't hear it until he pulls the face. Then I notice.
It happens every time. This time of night, every single time. Joys of not living alone. But yeah, it's to me, like, the soundtrack in horror actually is a super important element. You know, like, there's so many things that just wouldn't be scary without the scary soundtrack. That's why you get those memes about like, oh, you know, things are bad when you start hearing the scary soundtrack. And it's like, yeah, but without it, it wouldn't be scary. You know? So,
yeah, man.
And yeah, sound design, as you said, same deal there, where it's like, you know, again, Last of Us with the clickers. That's why they're scary. Like,
they just sound gross.
Yeah, exactly. The elements of their gameplay are obviously terrifying as well, but the sound they make is so iconic and so scary.
I was going to say, it makes it distinctive and iconic, and it just adds a big element to it. Otherwise, they're kind of just forgettable zombies.
Yep.
Also,
exactly.
yeah.
Which all the others are.
That feeling you get when you hear it, you're like, oh shit, not these guys.
Yeah, you know what's coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. It's you know, like a lot of people, it's one of those interesting things, like, you know, a lot of people think that the more variety in enemies, the better and that sort of thing. But often if you have familiar traits in enemies, that can actually make them scarier, because it takes you back to like, oh no, I know what these were like, and this is later in the game, so it's going to be worse.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I want to play more horror RPGs.
There's not many, which I think, yeah.
Like when I was playing Fallout today, I was like, I don't know if I've ever played a horror RPG. And I was just trying to think of one. I was like, I don't really think I have.
There's lots, as I said, there's plenty of RPGs with horror elements, Fallout, Dragon Age.
Yeah. I'd love to see a full-on horror RPG. Like Call of Cthulhu, I guess, is, but it's not real. I don't know. It's weird.
It's a difficult mesh, because with RPGs, the leveling up and the the grind and the build elements, you know, the classic RPG gameplay elements, not so much the choice-based stuff, but like the build elements often actually kind of detract from the horror experience because they by necessity give you tools.
Yeah, true. I
Which I
do
think
wonder
is-
though if like to get more experience in the sake of grinding, you had to put yourself into uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, I'm sure it could be
Maybe
done
that
in an
would work.
interesting way. Yeah.
I'd love to see something like that. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Let's make a game.
Yeah, let's make a game. It's that's up there with let's start a bar, or let's buy a bar, or
Let's buy a bar. Yeah.
yeah, let's buy a bar. That's up there with that. Let's make a game. Let's buy a bar.
Let's
Yeah,
start
these
a
things will go well.
company.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That always goes well. Nah, cool. I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to say really
No,
about.
I think I've said more or less most of my thoughts. Like I said, I think my biggest thing with horror games is really just the effectiveness of imagination and what
Yeah.
you can bring to a horror game yourself by not being given all the answers.
Absolutely, and I think not enough game developers and movie makers and writers use that. There's such an epidemic of over-explaining, and I think that often comes because the people making it need to know more than the people experiencing it in order to kind of do it or feel like they do, and then often want to give that information out. I know I've fallen guilty to that in things I've written, where it's like the players would have been better off not knowing that information.
It's
but
hard. It's really hard to not just explain everything because
Yeah.
you're like, I know why it works, but
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not why it's effective.
Yeah.
Is knowing why it works.
Yeah.
It's having most of the answers and putting the puzzle piece together yourself.
There's actually certain a trick with that I use, which I've used in my homebrew D&D campaign as well. It's not so much for horror, though I do use it a bit there. Is deliberately not knowing the answer. As in, I actually don't know the answer to one of the core questions of my homebrew D&D campaign. I have deliberately chosen not to give it an answer. I just let it be. Which, if you're one of the players, ignore that. You didn't hear that.
Well, I think there obviously you have to take precaution with that so that things don't become confusing and aimless. But I think
This one's
I
a
think-
very. I'll tell you what it is. It's religion. I have
Yeah.
deliberately not. So this is a world where I have basically said, I don't know if God's real. No one in this world knows if the gods are real. No one knows. If you're a religious person, you're going off faith.
yeah, because you literally just you come up with your own answer and you
Yeah.
base what you do and how you play based off of the answer you've given yourself.
Yeah.
And I love that. I
Yeah.
love it. It's the best way to play things.
Indeed.
Anyways, that was cool. We talked about the spoopy things. I think
Yeah.
we actually were a tad under an hour this time, but we mostly said everything we had to say, unless Cal had anything else in mind.
There's no need to make people keep listening to us drawling on it, I think.
No, not really. I guess thinking about it, I should probably delve into it a little bit more.
I think that's true for all of us, even Jack.
yeah.
It's a bit of an
Yeah.
underexplored area for us.
I've
Yeah.
probably played the most, but there's still so much to play.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'd like
but-
to check more things out.
Yeah, so if you want to leave us some recommendations, go for it.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love
Give
to
us
hear
your
what.
spoopiest games.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. Maybe we can actually stream them. We do that now, so we'd love to stream some fan suggestions, games we haven't played, horror games. Horror games always go well on a stream because you get to see me poo myself.
I legitimately had to take breaks during Dead Space because I was pretty not feeling well, and I was like, "Hey, just so that I don't have an accident on stream, I'm just gonna leave for a second. Maybe I should have just played and let it happen. That would have probably been funnier."
Go
Would have
method.
ended up on one of those streaming fail compilations, and that might have
Yeah.
gotten us more traction.
Yeah, it could have
Yeah.
been the channel, man.
Jeez,
Should've
I
done
lost so many views.
Yes, should have shit yourself on stream, Jack.
Damn it! I'm
All
obviously
right,
not
give us a thumbs up and a comment if you want Jack to shit himself on
No,
stream.
Is that all it takes? Wow, okay. I mean,
please no. I've already been. They're already trying to con me into doing like a raging series or whatever.
A gamer rage, yeah.
Yeah.
oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, so all of that should happen. Absolutely, that should happen.
Please
yeah.
no.
So yeah, let us
Alright.
know what your thoughts on horror in games are. Do you love it? Do you hate it? And give us your suggestions for what you'd love to see us play or love for us to play or even cover. Any of that. And if you think our opinions about horror are wrong and just that we should always show everything and the more disgusting the monster, the better and less imagination. And if
Seeing is believing.
Seeing is fearing.
I think there's merit to like exploitation sometimes when it's just like this is balls to the wall, like you know what you're gonna get when you play it, kind of thing.
I think it depends on the game, but I think
yeah.
Probably, I think
there's moments of that in
right.
Until Dawn, and they were like kind of moments. So how far did you get into that?
I only when I played with you guys.
Yeah, cool. So we're going to stream that. Once lockdown is over, we are going to stream Callum playing all of Until Dawn. That's
I hope I can make the same choices again where I was just constantly being a boss mediator and diffusing every conflict situation.
Yeah. It's also been long enough that I don't remember a lot of that game. So
I do.
Yeah, that'll be good. I'm looking forward to that actually.
I'm yet to see anyone save everyone on their first playthrough. So
there's also a new Dark Pictures game that just came out. We could probably do too.
I haven't played any of those. It'd be worth playing them. But, yeah.
Cool.
All right. Cool.
Alrighty, boys.
Yeah. I guess we'll see you guys next week. I just thought I was Yong Yeah for a second.
Yeah. And for context, we filmed this yesterday. From when you're seeing it, probably because we couldn't fit it into the timetable. We got it done because we're professionals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Such professionals.
So we need to think of our next topic in 2 days.
So don't expect to see any of your suggestions in the next video. But if you give us some good ones, one after that. We always want to hear your suggestions for what to discuss. Yeah. And your opinions about us. Roast us, as I've said many times.
I dare you. No, please don't.
No, please do.
Right,
roast him. He deserves it.
I try so hard.
And got so far. But in the end, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Man. All right. Thanks for hanging, friends. I think it's literally been an hour now, so we should call it quits.
Yeah.
Goodbye. So long. Farewell. To you, I say copyright claim. Bye.
Cheers.